I set the turkey on the trivet at 6 p.m. sharp, like I had for 15 years, and turned on the porch light that made our azaleas look like they were holding candles. By 6:12, Maurice had kissed my cheek, church-sweet peppermint breath, and said, "Just a quick errand, baby. Be right back." I watched his taillights slip down Cahaba Road like two red eyes closing. By 7:48 p.m., steam had finished with us both. The turkey was cooling under its golden skin, like a secret already told, and my breath clouded the window in slow sighs. The house ticked. Radiators, clock, my own jaw clenching. That's the rhythm betrayal keeps. Soft, so you can pretend it's the house settling. On the hall table, a blue gift bag that wasn't mine. Tissue paper white as choir robes. When I lifted it, something metal kissed the bottom. Clink. A brass key with a laminated tag. Lakeside Storage 3B. No card, no ribbon. I am 62. I keep receipts, and I keep my questions until they've ripened. I placed the key on a saucer like it could stain wood. My phone buzzed. A text from Maurice. Be right back. The kind of lie that learned to sit up and beg. In the kitchen, the turkey's juices gelled along the rim of the pan, a little halo of fat catching the light. I fixed plates alone because a woman can both hope and eat. I was chewing his favorite, dark meat, a little cranberry, when a slip of paper, folded into the crease of the gift bag, slid free. The bank's logo flashed, Red Mountain Credit Union, and a date, Dec 10, 2024. The numbers below made my tongue go wooden. $85,000 cash deposit. The stamp smudged like someone had pressed too hard. I sat down. I didn't shout. At my age, I don't shout. I document. I took photos. Key, tag, slip. The hall clock flipped to 7:52 with a small cough. First Calvary's Christmas Eve service would start at 7. The fellowship hall pie table would already be half empty. The ushers would be lining the last of the luminaries along the walk. My husband, Deacon Carter, beloved of widows and baritones, was wherever errand had always meant, while I watched gravy congeal and the world tilt exactly 2 degrees colder. The garage door opener blinked on the visor of his 2008 Buick. Habit is a soft prison. I put on my coat, slipped the blue bag into my tote, and felt the key's teeth through the fabric. My car keys waited in a ceramic bowl, patient as good manners. I took his instead. If a man won't bring you the truth, you drive to where it's kept. Outside, I could see my breath again, like a small ghost that wouldn't go inside. I slid into the Buick, pressed the opener, and listened to the door rise with a groan we'd both ignored all year. I eased down the driveway and turned where he turned, left at Overton, straight past the Piggly Wiggly, and then, like always, out of the neighborhood and into the kind of December darkness that feels like a closed mouth. When the Lakeside Storage sign appeared, its blue letters buzzing like gnats, something in me unclenched and sharpened at the same time. But why was 118 Walnut Street stamped on the side of every box inside Unit 3B? If stories like this help you breathe, tap like and subscribe. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. Concrete detail. Unit rent $129.mo. Ledger totals. Specific street names. Price tags. The steel door of 3B rolled up like a tongue rolling back a lie. Cold concrete breath met me. Mothballs. Sawdust. A sweetness of new paint that had no business smelling like Christmas Eve. My phone flashlight swept over stacked boxes, each with a black stamp, 118 Walnut Street. On top, a roll of robin's egg paint tape and a bag from Jefferson Hardware. 16-gauge nails, 3 deadbolts, oak thresholds, 412.67. Receipts dated Decembers going back years. "Ma'am, we close at 8, a voice called down the corridor. A young man with keys jangling at his belt stopped a few feet away. Name tag, Ronnie. His eyes tucked under his cap brim, careful but curious. "Won't be long," I said, and put a grandmother's smile on. "Unit rent paid up?" He checked a tablet. "Yeah, $129 a month. Auto draft. Been steady since, wow, 2010. 15 Christmases." I pressed my hand against the nearest box to stay upright. My palm met the corner of a manila folder slipping free. I caught it. Across the tab, in Maurice's church-clean handwriting, Walnut, deed. Inside, a draft quitclaim deed transferring 118 Walnut Street to Talia Brooks. A sticky note stuck like a yellow tongue. Notary, Deck 24, 6:30 p.m., across from the church. My husband had set his betrayal like a place card. "Ma'am," Ronnie said softly. "You okay?" I was, and I wasn't. "Do you have entry logs? Last time someone used this unit today?" He glanced over his shoulder, then at me. "We keep them. Cameras, too. Folks usually only care when something's missing." "It is," I said. "Time." He hesitated long enough to tell me he'd been taught to mind his business, then long enough again to tell me he was his mother's son. "He came at 5:41, Ronnie murmured, eyes on the tablet. "Left at 5:53, same man, same Buick I seen every Christmas Eve since I took this job." "What did he carry?" "Gift baskets," he said, "but the heavy kind." I took pictures, the folder, the drafted deed, the sticky note. My camera shutter sounded like a small judge clearing her throat. At the back of the unit, a pegboard held a single brass key hook, empty now. On a nail above it hung a calendar open to December 2024, the 24th circled in red and written over, 6:30, notary, deed. The 7 p.m. line read, "Service, Angel Baskets, testimony. 2 tracks, 2 lives, 1 hour to choose which one he'd bless with his presence." I snapped the calendar too. My pulse kept time with the hum of the fluorescent lights. I had the N2 documents now, and the clock had announced itself in red ink. I slipped the folder into my tote beside the blue bag. The key's teeth pressed my thigh, an odd comfort. Evidence has its own warmth. Back in the Buick, I dialed Maurice. Voicemail. I dialed again. "You've reached Deacon Carter." Beep. "Maurice, it's 6:02. I know about Walnut. I know about 6:30. If you step into that church tomorrow, I'll—" By the time I eased the Buick back onto Cahaba Road, the sky had the bruised blue of a fruit pressed too hard. The dashboard clock winked 6:11 p.m. I could feel the 6:30 appointment breathing down my neck like bad weather. Still, the past reached up and caught my ankle. December 2011, my mother's last Christmas. Hospice had set the morphine pump by the window so she could see the oak she'd planted with Daddy. Morris had leaned in, peppermint breath like tonight, and whispered, "Just a quick errand, Eve. Be right back." He returned after the chaplain finished prayers, and my mother's hand went slack in mine. He set down a gift basket with a ribbon fat as a liar's smile, and the card read, "Angel Basket, Deacon Carter." I told myself grief stains the clock, makes minutes look like hours. I told myself good men do good things. A week later, I found the pawn ticket in his suit coat. Estate bracelet, $14K, $600 loan. He said it was for a church roof emergency. "We'll buy it back, baby." We never did. The chandelier in the fellowship hall sparkled brighter the next Sunday. Mama's wrist felt naked in my dreams for a year. The turn signal clicked like a metronome while my heart kept a faster song. I pulled into Red Mountain Credit Union's parking lot, empty as a promise. The branch was closed, but the ATM would still tell the truth if I asked in the right language. I slipped in my card. The machine hummed, kind as a nurse. Available balance, $14,908.37. We had $142,300 in that account in August. Every box I'd packed at the post office, every overtime shift he sang balm over. My throat went dry as the receipt. Maurice had been moving money through Decembers like a magician palming coins. I took the slip, folded it neat, filed it in my tote with the blue bag and the draft deed. At my age, I don't shout. I document. I photographed the screen before it blinked back to the bank's logo, then turned toward Jefferson Hardware 2 blocks over, praying they were still open and their printer worked faster than whatever pen Maurice had ready at 6:30. The bell over the hardware door gave a church lady tisk. The place smelled like cut lumber and history. A clerk with a chewed pencil behind his ear lifted a chin. "We're closing at 6:30, ma'am." "Then we want the same miracle," I said, and set the bag on the counter. I slid a receipt from the top, 4 and 12.67, toward him. "Who handles orders for 118 Walnut Street? I need copies." He glanced at the slip. That's Matt's route, ma'am. He's already clocked out. He hesitated. But I can pull the ledger. The printer chattered. I listened like it was telling a bedtime story I'd finally grown old enough to hear. Line after line, Decembers stacked like snowdrifts. Paint, locks, trim, fixtures. The totals made a cruel advent calendar. My eyes snagged on a bold delivery signature across multiple slips. Loopy, practiced, not Maurice. Talia Brooks. A bell rang in the back. The clerk flinched, looked over his shoulder. We gotta close, ma'am. Give me the last 24 months and the page with that name. My voice surprised me, low even, no tremor. He printed until the paper tray emptied. I paid $6 for copies and $2 for a brown envelope to hold them. Back in the car, 624 glowed at me. I dialed Laverne from choir. You still at First Calvary? Baby, I'm plating pecan pie, she said, breathless. You coming? Deacon Carter said he... Laverne, listen. I swallowed, tasted tin. I need a picture of the Angel Basket ledger, the total they wrote tonight, and the rounding, if they rounded anything. Evelyn, that's not... Please, I said. Quiet can be a lever when you've spent your life lifting for other people. Text it to me in 2 minutes. She huffed the way people do when they love you and don't know how yet. 2 minutes. I turned the key. The Buick coughed awake. The phone pinged before I reached the exit. A photo, slightly skewed. Angel Basket, total $4,000. Below it, in tidy script, round to $3,500 for petty cash. I stared until the numbers steadied. He'd shaved $500 off Christmas itself. At 6:27, I pulled into the lot across from the church, where the notary's light glowed like a lighthouse for sharks. But when the notary opened the door, why did she call me Mrs. Brooks? The office smelled like toner and cologne, bureaucratic and sharp. A ceramic snowman on the receptionist's desk blinked its plastic lights at me as if it knew a secret and was too cheap to tell it straight. The notary wore a red sweater and the kind of smile women use when they've seen everything twice. Her plaque read, Mrs. E. Harris, Notary Public. Mrs. Brooks, you're right on time, she said. I let silence do the first slice. People explain themselves to silences the way they never will to questions. Her smile stumbled. Apologies. That's who's scheduled. 6:30 p.m., deed signing for 118 Walnut Street. Are you with Mr. Carter? I am Mrs. Carter, I said. Each word set a plate on a table I was finally ready to eat at. And I'd like to see anything with my husband's name on it before he arrives. Her eyes measured me. Age, ring, ferocity. She flicked through a manila folder on the counter. I can't disclose documents without parties present. I set my driver's license down, then the photo of the draft deed from the storage unit, then the audio app opened to record. I didn't press it yet. You keep a sign-in log, Mrs. Harris? For your own records in case of dispute? She hesitated, then slid a ledger forward. A column for name, time, document type. I trailed a finger along the lines until I reached today. 5:15, T. Brooks, pre-check, property description. 5:52, M. Carter, pre-check, deed language. The next line was blank, waiting like an open mouth. The door chimed. Cold air and the smell of aftershave I'd bought him for our 30th anniversary in 2019. Maurice walked in with his church smile screwed on straight. He faltered when he saw me. Eve, he said, gentle like a pastor and careful like a thief. You didn't need to come all the way down here. Apparently I did, I said. I kept my hands still so I wouldn't clock him across the sanctified throat with the blue gift bag. Mrs. Harris tried to rally. So, both parties are here. Ms. Brooks should be... Mrs. Brooks, Maurice said quickly, then swallowed the honorific like it burned. I mean, Talia. She's running late. We can start the notarization. We will not start, I said. I reached into my tote, drew out the hardware ledgers, and fanned them like hymnals. Explain to me why Talia Brooks signs for locks and paint at 118 Walnut with our nest egg buying the nails. Maurice's eyes flicked to Mrs. Harris and back. Evelyn, don't embarrass yourself. That house is for the Angel Basket families. Transitional housing. It's charity. You know how folks use my name to get a deal. I slid the ATM balance across the counter. The numbers sat there like a witness too tired to lie. "Charity starts at home, Deacon. It shouldn't drain it." His jaw pulsed. "You've always been ungrateful," he murmured, low enough to call it private later. "I work for the community while you keep a tally like God's book. At my age, I don't shout. I document." I tapped my phone and played his voicemail, his own voice warm and oily. "Yes, ma'am. 6:30 p.m. tonight for the deed. Across from First Calvary. Appreciate you staying open on Christmas Eve." The notary's eyes widened, the way a woman's do when a puzzle she didn't ask to solve clicks into place. Maurice reached for the folder Mrs. Harris held. I put my hand on it first. He leaned in so close I could count the tiny scars candy canes make on a man's breath. "Don't do this, Eve," he whispered. "You'll ruin everything." "Everything that belongs to whom?" I said, and the calm in my voice felt like a locked door finally closing from the inside. The office door chimed again. Footsteps, a woman's perfume, vanilla and nerve. Talia stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold, a boy behind her, with eyes that shot right through me. She smiled at Maurice like he could put the moon in a paper sack. "Sorry we're late," she laughed. Maurice, the pastor's looking for you across the street after we sign." "Mrs." Harris glanced between us, offense and pity wrestling under her lashes. I turned the envelope of ledgers toward Talia and tapped a single receipt where a name sprawled above the total, ink still bold from December 10th. But why was my own signature perfectly forged beneath "received by," dated the night Mama died? My name, written in a hand that wasn't mine, looked back at me from the receipt like a stranger trying to borrow my face. "Received by Evelyn M. Carter, 12/24/2011. The night Mama died." The letters had my neat schoolteacher slant, only too tidy. A mimic that didn't know grief shakes the tail of a Y. "Cute," Talia said, the word wobbling. "Maybe the clerk." "Forgery," I said. "And a felony." Morris laced his fingers on the counter, wedding band winking like a dare. "Stop. You don't understand, Eve. Walnut isn't what you think." "Then tell me what it costs," I said. "In dollars like the bank counts. In hours like my mother counted when you disappeared." Mrs. Harris sat very still. Notaries know when a room turns into evidence. Maurice's smile thinned. "It's a blessing house. I've put in $92,000 over the years. Anonymous donors. I stewarded it." "From our account," I answered, sliding the ATM slip to the edge. $142,300 in August. $14,908 tonight. Steward that." Talia touched his arm. Maurice, maybe we should reschedule." He shook her off. "We are not performing for an audience." His eyes cut to me. "We'll handle this at home." "At my age, I don't handle thieves at home," I said. I notarized the truth. Mrs. Harris cleared her throat. "I cannot proceed if consent is in question." "It isn't," Maurice said. "It is," I said, and we canceled each other like bad arithmetic. The boy, Deshaun, I guessed, tall and trying not to be noticed, shifted his weight. His gaze kept falling on the blue bag peeking from my tote, curious and wary. He didn't look like a secret. He looked like a child asked to carry one. I lowered my voice, offered Maurice one last small bridge over a burning river. "Call the bank. Reverse what you can. Bring me proof. We go to the pastor together at 7, tell the board the house exists, put it in the church's name, audit the angel basket, and you apologize. We can be poor and honest, but we cannot be this." His nostrils flared. He leaned in, whisper ablade. "You will not ruin my name on Christmas." "Your name did that," I said, and tapped the ledger. He snatched for the folder in Mrs. Harris's hands. I was faster. Years of delivering registered mail taught me how to hold on to paper when a man decides to make it a tug of war. "Oh, you've gotten bold," he spat softly, smile never moving for the room. "You never did know how to be grateful for what I provide." "What you provided," I said, "was bought with my overtime and our promises." The door chimed again. Laverne, cheeks flushed from the cold, hustled in with a foil-wrapped pie like a shield. "I was told to deliver this to Deacon Carter's Christmas errand," she sang for the receptionist's benefit. Then her eyes hit the scene and went quiet. She slid next to me without asking and placed her phone on the counter. The angel basket photo glowed. $4,000, round to $3,500. You told me to read, she murmured. I read. Talia's laugh snapped, brittle. This is madness. Dee, let's go sign at the church office then. Mrs. Harris squared her shoulders. No one is signing anything until I know no one is being coerced. Maurice dropped his voice enough to make it hurt. Evelyn, if you make a scene, I will tell them you're unstable. We both know you've had episodes since your mother. What I have, I said, is a memory and proof. I pulled the recorder close and pressed start. State your intention for 118 Walnut Street, I told him, and who Talia is to you. His facade trembled. For a moment, I saw the man beneath the choir robe, sweating through December. He set his jaw. Turn that off. No. The church bells across the street began to toll 6:45, metal voices counting down his commandments. He reached across the counter, palm open like a benediction turned into a grab. I didn't flinch. So why did the notary whisper, Mrs. Carter, step into my office now, and slide me a copy of the deed with a second secret page I'd never seen? Mrs. Harris led me into a small side room lined with tax posters and Christmas stickers, the kind of office where women have learned to make war with forms. She shut the door halfway, enough for air and suspicion. I keep a duplicate for my records, she said, voice low. Your husband brought a 2-page deed earlier. What he left for you to see was one. The second names a life estate for... She tapped the paper. Talia Brooks. Heat climbed my spine, then cooled into something steady. A life estate meant no selling without her, no moving without her shadow. Christmas forever, paid monthly. Mrs. Harris's hand hovered near the page, careful. I cannot ethically notarize if I suspect fraud or lack of consent. You suspect right, I said. But the pastor will say I'm jealous, and the board will say after the service, and Maurice will say charity. We can timestamp, she whispered, and slid the page toward the copier. When we stepped back out, Maurice had rearranged the room the way charming men rearrange reality. Pastor Hill stood there in his camel coat, smile solemn, eyes taking inventory. 2 deacons flanked him like parentheses. Laverne startled. Talia straightened. The boy looked at the floor. Evelyn, Pastor said, sorrow ripening his voice. Why bring private matters to strangers on Christmas Eve? Because Maurice brought Christmas to strangers and left me with private matters, I said. Morris cupped the air like he was lifting a blessing. Pastor, my wife is anxious. Walnut is a church project. This conversation should be at the board table, not the notary's counter. Then let's go to the board table, I said, holding up the second page. With this. His eyes flashed. For the first time all night, the smile left and didn't come back. He pivoted to Pastor with dizzying speed. A misunderstanding. The life estate was a placeholder until the church paperwork. Which church? I asked. The one that rounds $500 out of baskets? Or the one that lets forgeries sign my name while my mother's dying? Pastor's gaze skittered. He wanted peace, like a man wants quiet in a nursery. Sister Evelyn, tonight is sacred. Let the deacons handle receipts after the service. Come, we'll pray. They formed a circle before I could blink. Hands linked, eyes closed, the old velvet noose. I stood at the edge. Maurice reached for me, palm open, the universal sign for shutting a woman's mouth. No, I said. I don't join circles where truth gets smothered. Then we will pray for you, Pastor intoned. They imagined prayer was a broom. I imagined a projector flickering awake across the street. Deacon Carter, Mrs. Harris said, crisp now. I'm declining the notarization pending clarity. You may not pressure signings in my office. Maurice's voice took the shape of a threat and dressed it as concern. Evelyn, come home. You're tired. You'll say things you can't unsay. At my age, I said, I say them into microphones. Laverne's shoulder touched mine. You can tell who loves you by who moves their body to your side when men start speaking soft. She whispered, Fellowship Hall is setting up the projector for the children's pageant. Mike's hot at 7:05. Maurice heard anyway. You wouldn't dare. I would prepare, I said, and patted the blue bag. Evidence has weight. It makes your arm ache and your spine straight. He leaned close, voice so low it came out of the side of his mouth. If you open your mouth in that hall, I'll tell them about your episodes, Evelyn, about the pawn ticket, about the time you begged me not to leave your mother's bedside. I begged you to stay, I said. You left. Pastor stepped between us, palms out. Sister Evelyn, be wise. Don't tear down what God is building. Then God needs a better contractor, I said. Outside, the choir swelled through the night air. Oh, come, all ye faithful. Families crossed the street, glitter of coats and chatter. 6:58 blinked on the notary's clock. The door chimed again, and a gust of cold announced someone new. Ronnie from the storage facility, breathless, a USB drive in his hand. Ma'am, he puffed, eyes bright. You asked about CCTV? I pulled the last 5 Christmas Eves like you said. Maurice's face drained and then flushed scarlet, a tinsel fire. So when Ronnie's footage played on Mrs. Harris's computer and showed Maurice carrying heavy angel baskets into Walnut with Talia at midnight, why did Pastor still say, let's not rush to judgment, save it for after the children's pageant? The moment Ronnie's footage froze on Maurice hefting angel baskets through 118 Walnut's door at 11:58 p.m., 2 years running, Pastor's voice floated over it like incense. Sister Evelyn, please, after the children's pageant, we won't ruin their Christmas. That's how people keep women quiet. They put a baby on a stage and call it sacred. Mrs. Harris lifted her chin. I decline tonight's notarization, she said, stamping void across the intake form, the kind of thump that sounds like a gavel. Maurice's smile cracked. He recovered faster than a liar with a deadline. We'll reconvene at the church, he said warmly to Pastor. We can shepherd this gently. Gently is how wolves eat, I murmured. Laverne squeezed my arm. We crossed to First Calvary with the stream of families. My phone read 7:06 p.m. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee and gingerbread. The projector already hummed, its lens aimed at a paper backdrop of Bethlehem. I spotted Kiki, the teen who ran AV, coiling cords near the stage. A deacon, Marshall, stepped between us, smile tight. Sister Evelyn, Pastor asked that you enjoy the program from the back. We'll hear statements afterward. Pastor had moved faster than grief. He'd positioned 2 deacons by the mic stand like it was a vault. Maurice greeted people with his deacon's palm, soaking up blessings that had never cost him a night alone beside a cooling turkey. Talia hovered near the cookie table. The boy, Deshaun, sat stiff in a metal chair, eyes darting between me and the exit. I sidled to Kiki and kept my voice light. You got an open HDMI? Her eyes flicked to the deacons, back to me. Tonight is for the babies, Mrs. Carter. Babies grow up on lies or truth, I said. Tonight decides which. Marshall coughed. Sister Evelyn, let the children sing. The pageant began. Angels with bent wings, a Joseph who kept scratching under his choir robe. My heart moved stubbornly at silent night, but habit is not consent. I held the blue bag like a relic and watched Maurice taking the offering baskets down the side aisle, counting while the nursery toddlers sang about joy. Between carols, Pastor took the mic. Friends, love suffers long and is kind. His eyes slid toward me, and wisdom knows her hour. I checked my clock. 7:19, Ronnie whispered from the back. The files copied weird. Your phone won't play them. He held up the USB, apology heavy in his hand. We need a computer. Kiki half raised a hand before catching Marshall's glare. My window was closing. The notary would lock at 8 and if Maurice got Talia in front of a different stamp, Walnut would be cement and grief. Maurice drifted by, all benevolence. Under the hymn, his whisper knifed my ear. Sit quietly, and I won't mention your pawn ticket or the time you screamed at the hospice nurse. I'll say you're tired. At my age, I'm not tired, I said. I'm loaded. Loaded with what? His smile sharpened. Dates and amounts. He moved on, greeting the county commissioner with a handshake that made cameras click. That handshake was a second stake, reputation. If I failed tonight, he'd roll this scandal in sugar and feed it back to me as misunderstanding. I caught Deshaun watching, jaw tight. When our eyes met, he looked away, then back, then away again like a boy practicing permission. He stood, drifted near the AV cart, and murmured without moving his lips, "There's a laptop in the choir room closet. Kiki keeps it. No password." He didn't look at me. He looked at his shoes like he understood the geometry of betrayal better than his age should allow. "Thank you," I breathed. I edged toward the side hall. Marshall moved to block me. Laverne appeared like a polite storm. "Deacon," she smiled, "is your wife still making those sausage balls? I've been meaning to ask the spice blend." He pivoted toward her out of reflex. Women know the timbre that makes men's manners tug on their leashes. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. I slid down the hall's shadow, my heart clicking like the metronome of 725. In the choir room, I opened the closet. Stacked robes, a box labeled "Stars," a scuffed laptop under a tangle of lights. I flipped it open. The desktop blinked awake, no password, like the boy said. I dragged Ronnie's USB into the port and waited while the cursor spun, the way patience spins holes in a woman's life. Outside, the shepherds bleated on cue. The first file loaded. The timestamp glowed. 12/24, 2020, 23:57. Maurice, shoulders hunched in the blue pool of Walnut's porch light, carried a basket so heavy he used both arms. Talia opened the door. Their mouths moved. No audio. Ronnie grimaced. "Cameras don't take sound. Sorry." "Pictures are loud enough," I said. My phone buzzed. Bank fraud alert finally answering my dispute with a case number. Too late for tonight's lock, but just in time to lace tomorrow. I copied the files to the laptop and to my phone, belt, and suspenders. Back in the hall, Pastor announced, "One last carol, then Coco." I exhaled, felt something old break loose in my chest without shattering. But when I reached for the laptop to wheel it on stage, why did the power die and the screen go black while Maurice's hand tightened on the mic like it knew my name? The lights flickered once, twice, and then the fellowship hall sighed into dim. The emergency bulbs along the exits glowed like weak stars. Someone chuckled. Pastor lifted his palms. "We'll finish acoustic, like the manger," he said, voice cheerful around his fear. "Breaker!" Kiki hissed, already moving. "The cocoa urn trips it sometimes." Maurice kept the mic, even dead. You can tell a man by how he holds power when it's unplugged. He raised his other hand with that open-palmed pretense. "Friends, while we restore the lights, Don't," I said, not loud, and stepped toward the AV cart with the dark laptop. Panic tried to climb my throat. I put my foot on its fingers. At my age, I don't panic. I plan. I popped the battery, reseated it, hit power. Nothing. "Outlet by the tree," Kiki murmured, appearing at my elbow like a miracle in a jean jacket. Different circuit. We slid the plug in. The screen flared, then steadied. The Bethlehem backdrop threw the laptop's glow back like a little moon. "Can you get me on the projector?" I asked. She chewed her lip. "Deacon Marshall told me no." I opened the blue bag and took out the $85,000 deposit slip, set it on the cart the way you set a communion cup. "Kiki, if you were 62 and a man had been using your name like Whiteout for 15 Christmases, what would you want a girl your age to do?" She swallowed. "Run it," she said, and her hands moved, cable to port to lens, so fast I could have believed in angels again. From the doorway, a new shape stepped in. Mr. Alvarez, the head custodian, keys heavy as a rosary on his belt. "Breaker's fine," he told Pastor, then winked at me like he'd long ago chosen the side with the broom. "But this outlet," he patted the projector's surge strip, "was never on that line." Maurice's jaw bulged. "We don't need visuals. You used visuals last Easter when you showed those mission photos," Laverne said sweetly. "Let Sister Evelyn show hers." Pastor tried to interrupt, but the children, sugar-drunk and curious, had gathered at the lip of the stage, eyes bright. Deshawn took 2 steps closer and stopped, hands fisted in his jacket pockets like gravity hurt. "Sound?" I asked Kiki. "No sound," she whispered. "CCTV doesn't record it." "Then we'll use mine," I said, and tapped my voicemail app. Maurice's earlier call to the notary waited. Ripe. I slid the laptop HDMI to the projector, placed my phone near the stage mic, and looked at Pastor. "Give me 3 minutes," I said. "Dates, amounts, a house. Then we can all pray with our eyes open." He hesitated. I watched how he folded his lips around fear of donors and headlines and who gets invited to the commissioner's breakfast. He nodded the way a man nods when he realizes the river has already risen. 3 minutes, he said. Maurice stepped forward, voice velvet-wrapped razor. "Sister Evelyn has had a difficult year." "At my age, I don't have difficult years," I said. "I have ledgers." I lifted the angel basket photo from Laverne's phone onto the screen. $4,000, round to $3,500. A few murmurs rippled. I put up the Red Mountain CU balance, $142,300, AUG, $14,908, deck 24, 6:20 p.m. The room tilted. People hear numbers like weather. Some ignore, others look for umbrellas. I gave them rain. "Now," I said, "Christmas Eve traditions." Kiki tapped the space bar. The screen filled with that blue-painted porch at 118 Walnut. Maurice, the man these people trusted with casseroles and grief, hefting year after year, 11:57 p.m., 11:59 p.m., 12:03 a.m., basket after basket into a house with Talia at the door. The room made a sound I've only heard at funerals, the place where breath and belief part ways. Maurice tried to laugh. "Staged for the shelter." "Shelter where?" I said. "Show the 501c3 letter." He didn't have one. I hit play on the voicemail and set my phone by the mic. His own voice grew large in the speakers. "Yes, ma'am, 6:30 p.m. tonight for the deed, across from First Calvary. Appreciate you staying open on Christmas Eve." Mrs. Harris stepped in from the side aisle then, neat as punctuation. "And I declined to notarize a life estate for Talia Brooks." She held up the second page. "Because Mrs. Carter did not consent." The hall went quiet in the sharp way that means judgment has arrived and would like everyone to sit up. Maurice's mask melted. "Evelyn," he said, warning and plea knotted, "think of Deshawn." I looked at the boy. He flinched at his name, then squared. Whatever he was to Maurice, he was not a shield. I turned to the crowd. Think of 15 Christmases and the woman who set a turkey at 6 p.m. and ate alone. I slid the forged 2011 receipt under the doc cam. Our signatures, mine real on 1,000 envelopes, fake here, glowed side by side. Think of a dying mother and a pawn ticket. Think of charity that rounds down by $500 and houses that never make the bulletin. A murmur swelled. Someone, Sister Pearl, said, "Lord," not as prayer, but as verdict. Pastor lifted a hand, but not to hush me. "Deacon Carter, do you have documentation?" he asked, voice steady like a man who has finally found the rails. Maurice opened his mouth, and 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway, hats under arms, called by someone's sense of order or Maurice's last defense. But when Officer Daniels asked, "Who has claim to 118 Walnut right now?" Why did Talia blurt, "It's for us"? He promised, before Maurice could shape his next lie. Officer Daniels's pen hovered above his notebook. "Who has claim to 118 Walnut Street right now?" "Us," Talia blurted, a step too fast. "It's for us," he promised. Her hand flew to her mouth like she could push the words back in. "Us? Who?" Daniels asked, neutral as marble. "Me and my son, Deshawn," she said softer. But the microphone caught it anyway. Truth can be loud without trying. Maurice's mouth opened on a honeyed lie. I beat him to the scrape. I lifted the second page from Mrs. Harris, the one where Life Estate, Talia Brooks, sat like mildew. "This page says the same," I told the officer. "Against my consent. Paid from a joint account that held $142,300 in August, now $14,908. Daniels took the copy with gloved fingers, eyes scanning, cop brain counting. "Ma'am," he asked Mrs. Harris, "you declined this?" "Yes," she said, calm as a ruler. At 6:49 p.m., I stamped and logged. The room shifted. Sister Pearl's hand went to her chest. The county commissioner, still near the cookie table, took one slow step back like he could unknow the handshake he'd shared with Maurice 10 minutes ago. Morris tried to find pastoral in his throat and came up with gravel. "Officer, this is a domestic misunderstanding. Church property. My wife is upset." "Upset is not a crime," Daniel said. "Fraud might be." He turned to me. "Do you have evidence of funds moving from your joint account to this property?" "At my age, I don't carry grudges," I said. "I carry receipts." I held out the Red Mountain CU alerts, the printed ATM balance, the photo of the $85,000 cash deposit, stamped Deck 10, 2024. "And I have video," I added, nodding to the porch scenes rolling year after year. His partner, Officer Hughes, approached the screen, eyes narrowed. "No audio," she said. I set my phone by the mic again. Maurice's voicemail filled the hall. His voice, his 6:30 p.m. appointment. Mrs. Harris tapped her ledger, and I logged pre-check visits at 5:15 and 5:52. Daniel's jotted times. "Mr. Carter, do you have documentation that 118 Walnut is owned by a registered charity or that church funds have been approved for this property?" Maurice's shoulders squared. "The board has discussed." Pastor's gaze cut toward him. Not a nod, not a lifeline. "We have not voted," Pastor said, sounding like the truth had finally crawled up his leg and bit. "We were informed vaguely of a Christmas project." Talia took a trembling breath. "He said we'd do the papers tonight so we could move in by January 3rd. He said it was safer, not so many eyes around the holidays." The boy, Deshaun, stared at the floor, then lifted his head. His voice was a stone thrown into a quiet pond. "He said he'd be with us next Christmas all day." Every gaze turned. The metal chair creaked under the weight of judgment and a boy's small, brave sentence. Maurice's face sagged, then hardened. "Evelyn, you would drag a child into this?" "I didn't," I said. "You did." Daniels glanced at Hughes. A look passed, the kind that means we've moved from maybe to likely. He spoke low into his shoulder mic. Christmas inched toward consequence. Behind me, Kiki whispered, "Mrs. Carter, the USB is cloned on the laptop and on your phone." "Make one more," I said. "Email it to yourself at 7:34 p.m. Subject line, Angel Basket." "I got you," she breathed. Laverne nudged my elbow. "The board is muttering. They'll call an emergency session if you ask." "I won't ask," I said. "I'll notice them." I held up the forged 2011 receipt. "Officer, that signature, mine, on the night my mother died. I was at hospice at 9:22 p.m. I couldn't have signed for hardware at 9:30. Hughes angled the paper under the projector. "You have proof of your location that night?" "Yes," I said. "Hospice log. I kept the bill, 1,184 hours for the last 24 hours, dates and times." Daniels nodded. "We'll need copies." "I'll bring them," I said. "And the pawn ticket. And my work schedule from the post office." Maurice laughed once, no church in it. "You think you can bury me under paper?" "At my age," I said. "I know paper is heavier than dirt." Pastor cleared his throat. "Friends, we will move to the kitchen for a private clarification with the deacons and Sister Evelyn." I met Maurice's eyes. "Good," I said. "Bring your explanations and your God." But when we stepped into the stainless bright kitchen at 7:41 p.m., why was Talia already there with a shoebox of receipts and a breathless sentence that began, "He told me to sign your name whenever the clerk asked for a wife." The kitchen smelled like coffee grounds and bleach, the two scents that keep churches going. Stainless counters reflected everyone's faces like bad mirrors. 7:41 p.m. blinked on the wall clock above the industrial mixer. The deacons clustered near the ice machine. Pastor stood at the sink, as if he could rinse the night off. Talia clutched a shoebox tight to her ribs. "He told me to sign your name if the clerk asked for a spouse," she said, eyes skittering to Maurice and back. "Said it kept questions quiet. Said you hated Walnut 'cause of the taxes." "So you knew it was my name," I said. Not accusing, not consoling, just setting the coordinates. "And you used it." Tears stood in her lashes, mean little magnifiers. "He said it was for the church first, then for us. He said after New Year's we'd do it right. She swallowed. I got rent receipts from when he told us not to deposit the money, just cash. He said you'd see. She opened the shoebox. Stubs and slips and under-the-table IOUs shifted like a flock of paper birds. I saw walnut. I saw angel basket nights. I saw cash moving like a river where the taxman couldn't drink. Maurice snapped, "Talia," too sharp to be pastoral. Then smoother. "You're confused." "I'm not," she said, voice small but straight. "You said January 3rd. Pastor pinched the bridge of his nose. "Brother Carter, is there anything you wish to confess before the board convenes?" "Confess?" Maurice scoffed. "To what? Being a man who builds? Ask Evelyn where the pawn ticket went. Ask about her episodes when her mother—" "At my age," I cut in, "I don't hide my worst day to excuse your 15. I set the blue bag on the counter, one object at a time like communion. Key 3B, $85,000 deposit, ATM balance, forged 2011 slip, angel basket rounding photo, life estate page. Then I added a new piece, a crisp printout Kiki had run from the county assessor's website on the AV computer while the children sang. 118 Walnut Street, assessed at $187,000. Current owner listed as Goodson Revocable Trust, a name I'd never heard Maurice pray over. "Who is Goodson?" I asked. Maurice blinked. It was the first time I'd seen him without a script. Conduit. Temporary. Friendly to the church. "Spell it," I said. "G-O-O." "Don't," I said. "We'll find it." I slid my phone across the steel to Pastor. I'd queued a scheduled email, 7:55 p.m., to the board, the commissioner, and Red Mountain CU fraud. Subject line, angel basket, walnut, documents, attachments set, CCTV, voicemail, deed page, ledger, balances. "If you stop me tonight," I told him, "my email doesn't stop. And the bank's fraud team has a case number already. Also, Officer Daniels has a copy of the life estate." Pastor studied the draft, the recipients, the attachments. He wasn't a man I trusted to hold a line, but even a willow decides some winds aren't safe to bend to. He looked at Maurice. "Until further notice, you are suspended from handling offerings, benevolence, or property matters. The board will freeze any activity connected to Walnut." Maurice's breath came hard. "You can't—" "We can," Laverne said from the doorway, voice sweetened with fire. "And we will." I didn't smile. Victory before paper is just noise. I pulled a plain envelope from my tote. Inside lay the quietest trap I know. 3 questions on a half sheet. Handwriting round as first grade. I slid it to Pastor. "These are for tonight's service ending," I said. "Ask them from the pulpit. Ask them slow." He read. 1. Who authorized rounding down $500 from tonight's angel basket? 2. Why is there a life estate naming Talia Brooks on 118 Walnut with Mrs. Carter's consent missing? 3. Why does the deacon's voicemail confirm a 6:30 p.m. deed on Christmas Eve across from our church? "Simple," I said. "Dates, amounts, a house." He folded the paper, slid it into his breast pocket like a psalm. The clock coughed to 7:50 p.m. The choir down the hall was humming "Joy to the World" without irony. The officers waited in the doorway, patient as winter. Maurice leaned toward me, voice sawed down to bone. "If you speak those questions, I will break you. I will stand up and tell them about the hospice night, about your begging, about how you smashed a lamp in 2012 when you thought I was leaving." "I smashed a mosquito," I said. "The lamp was already cracked." "Semantics," he hissed. "Receipts," I said. Talia's fingers trembled against the shoebox. "He said he loved us," she whispered. "He said God put us under his mantle." "God didn't build this mantle," I said. "You did, we paid, and now they will own it." Pastor straightened. "We return to the hall," he said. "Sister Evelyn will have 3 minutes. Then we will ask 3 questions. Then we will adjourn to the boardroom for an emergency vote." I gathered the blue bag, the USB, the shoebox under my arm. Evidence as armor. My legs felt like they belonged to a younger woman and my spine to an older judge. As we reached the kitchen door, my phone vibrated. A new voicemail, Timestamp 7:51 p.m. I pressed it to my ear and heard Maurice's voice, unaware the line had connected earlier. Talia, after this, we drive to Goodson's place. He'll backdate the trust. Evelyn can't touch what she can't find. So why, when I lifted the mic again and faced the fellowship hall, did I smile and say, "Friends, who here knows Mr. Goodson's first name?" The boardroom at First Calvary has 2 portraits and 1 truth. Men like to sit at long tables when they're about to measure a woman. 7:58 p.m. Blinked on the cheap wall clock. Coffee rings freckled the laminate. Pastor took the head, deacons along the sides. Officer Daniels stood by the door, patient as a bookmark. I set the blue bag, the shoebox, and the USB in front of me like I'd brought a casserole of consequences. Maurice leaned back, hands tented. The pose said benevolence. The eyes said burn it all. "We can resolve this without spectacle," he began. "At my age, I don't resolve," I said. "I reconcile columns." Pastor cleared his throat. "Brother Carter, before we proceed, answer plainly. What is Mr. Goodson's first name?" Maurice's smile faltered. "We use last names in business." "Spell it," I said. "G-O... Phone," I told Pastor. He slid his cell across. I dialed the number Maurice had muttered on the voicemail. It rang twice. "Goodson," a voice answered, business bright, smug in a practiced way. "This is Evelyn Carter," I said. "Who are you to 118 Walnut?" A beat. "I manage trusts." "Which church employs you?" Silence. Paper rustled. "I'm a friend of Deacon Carter." "Sir," Officer Daniels said, dead calm, "you're on speaker in a church board meeting with law enforcement present. Do you hold title to 118 Walnut in any capacity?" A sigh. "The Goodson Revocable Trust holds the deed temporarily. We plan to backdate a transfer to—" Pastor flinched, like the word had slapped him. "Backdate?" "To align with donor intent," Goodson said quickly. "Which donor?" I asked. Static hummed over a truth refusing to be born. "Anonymous," he said. I slid the $85,000 deposit slip forward. "Anonymous looks a lot like our money." Maurice lunged for tone. "Evelyn, you don't understand complex stewardship." "I delivered registered mail for 39 years, I said. "Complex stewardship is knowing which box takes a signature and which box requires a face." Laverne, seated behind me like a pew in a storm, murmured, "Amen." Pastor turned to Maurice. "Did you authorize rounding $500 from the angel basket tonight?" Maurice swallowed. "We keep petty cash for emergencies." "Which emergencies?" Pastor asked. "Discretionary benevolence." "Where is it stored?" Maurice licked his lips. "Walnut." The room exhaled the way a congregation does when the soprano finally hits the note. Officer Hughes, at the door now, scribbled. Daniel's gaze sharpened. "Sir, to be clear, you move cash offerings off-site to a private property held by a trust managed by your associate?" Maurice's jaw bunched. "Temporarily." Talia slid the shoebox into the center. "He told me to log cash as repairs," she whispered. "Said the church needed it quiet." Deacon Marshall bristled. "Brother Carter, you used my signature to draw $2,000 last December." Maurice snapped. "You told me to handle it." "I did not," Marshall said, color high, "and I don't sign blank slips." I pulled my last quiet card, a digital recorder, old, silver, battery door taped, set on the table with a click. "This is the kitchen conversation we just had," I said, pressing play. The little machine purred, my voice, Pastor's questions, Maurice's threat shaped like concern. It all came back in metal honesty. Then I switched files. The hospice night, 2011. A voicemail I'd kept without forgiving. A younger Maurice. Just a quick errand, while monitors beeped behind Mama. I didn't look at him while it played. I looked at the board. Men who had let charm stand in for accounting. Pastor's face emptied, then refilled with something like backbone. He folded his hands. "Motion. Freeze all activities related to 118 Walnut. Ban Deacon Carter from handling funds. Refer Angel Basket and property matters to an external auditor. Deliver all documents and keys to law enforcement. Notify Red Mountain CU fraud." "Second," Laverne said, because secretaries know the rules as well as the names. "All in favor?" Pastor asked. Hands rose, marshals, Sister Pearls, even the county commissioner, eyes down, lifted his like a man hoping the camera missed him earlier. Only Maurice kept his palms in his lap, fingers flexing like a trapped thing. I'll appeal, he said, voice low. I'll take this church apart brick by brick with my friends. Pastor met his eyes. Your friends didn't vote. Daniels stepped forward. Sir, I need the key. I pinched the brass 3B tag between forefinger and thumb, felt its weight, then set it in the evidence bag Hughes held open. I slid across the life estate page, the USB, the shoebox, the ledgers. Paper and metal, all the quiet weapons I'd carried. Maurice stared at me like he'd never seen my face. You will be alone, he said, last arrow dressed as prophecy. You'll have your paperwork and your cold bed. At my age, I said, I sleep fine when the numbers add up. The clock tripped to 8:06 p.m. Somewhere down the hall, a child laughed, salvation unbothered by adult arithmetic. I stood, bones steady. So when the officers asked us to move back to the fellowship hall for next steps, why did Maurice reach for the exit and run straight into Mr. Goodson stepping through the door with a briefcase and a face the color of spoiled milk? Goodson's briefcase hit his knee when he saw the uniforms. He recovered, pulled his mouth into a shape that had closed 100 questionable deals. Evening, he chirped to the room. Just here to drop documents for a client. Drop them on the table, Daniel said, and state your name for the board. Calvin Goodson, he answered, smoothing his tie. Trust administrator. Pastor guided us back into the fellowship hall, which still smelled like sugar and revelation. The children had been ushered out. The projector glowed like a witness willing to repeat itself. People pressed in, faces tilted toward the stage the way flowers lean to windows. Maurice mounted the steps first, palms out, the politician of Potter's Field. Friends, he boomed without a mic. We've had misunderstandings. Use the microphone, I said evenly, so the minutes can hear you. He hesitated a beat, the kind of beat that ruins a man's timing, then took it. This church knows me. For 23 years I've carried food, fixed roofs, sat by bedsides, and carried baskets to Walnut at 11:59, I said. I walked up with the shoebox, set it on the music stand. Kiki angled the dock cam. Stubs bloomed 10 feet tall. Cash, repairs, T. Brooks, round down $500. Pastor held his 3 questions in his palm like a lit candle. Church, he said, voice steadier than an hour ago. We will proceed in order. First, who authorized rounding down $500 from tonight's angel basket? Murmurs. A deacon near the back cleared his throat. Deacon Carter told me it was for petty cash. I signed. Second, Pastor read, why is there a life estate naming Talia Brooks on 118 Walnut with Mrs. Carter's consent missing? Goodson tried to intercept. A drafting error we intended to backdate, I said, and Kiki played the voicemail. Maurice's voice filled the hall, 6:30, deed, appreciate you staying open, and then the snippet I'd captured at 7:51. We drive to Goodson's place. He'll backdate the trust. The words sagged in the air like rotten fruit. Gasps. And then something better. Silence with spine. Third, Pastor finished. Why does the deacon's voicemail confirm a 6:30 p.m. deed on Christmas Eve across from our church? Maurice gripped the stand, knuckles pale. He looked out over faces that had handed him casseroles, checks, secrets. He found Deshawn and faltered, just a breath, before the performance resumed. I was trying to protect a family, he said, the lie dressed honest. The church's name complicates taxes. I wanted to avoid scandal. I took the mic. You avoided paperwork, I said. You created scandal. You stole Christmas. From the aisle, Sister Pearl's voice rose, cracked sweet tea poured over rust. Pastor, put it to a vote. Hold, Daniel said, lifting a palm. Before internal actions, there's criminal concern. Mr. Goodson, open the briefcase. Goodson clicked it and laid out forms, draft deeds, trust memos, a letterhead with Goodson Revocable Trust in a font meant to look rich. Officer Hughes snapped photos. One document had December 20th typed, December 10th scribbled, and December 24 circled in pencil. The erasure marks were a confession with crumbs on its shirt. Backdating is not an administrative convenience, Hughes said, calm as a recipe. It's fraud. Goodson sputtered. My paralegal. Daniels turned to Pastor. We will need to secure 118 Walnut tonight. Consent from the church to seal the premises? Pastor, God help him, found his backbone like he'd laid it down in a pew and finally picked it up. The board authorizes law enforcement to seal the property and impound any church-related materials. He looked at me, not as a problem to quiet, but as a witness to trust. Sister Evelyn, will you accompany our delegation to inventory the site? Yes, I said, and I'll bring Ronnie's logs. Maurice's charm finally cracked into something truer. Evelyn, he spat, you would destroy me in front of our people? At my age, I said into the mic, soft as a needle. I don't destroy, I expose. He lurched toward the edge of the stage, fingers stabbing the air at me. You were never a wife, you were a ledger. The room recoiled the way a body does when a surgeon cuts the wrong place. Deshawn stood up. His voice shook but didn't break. Don't talk to her like that, he said. She told the truth. Goodson reached for Maurice's sleeve like a drowning man grabbing another drowning man. We should go, he hissed. You should stay, Daniels answered, his hand light on his belt, not on the holster, on the law. Pastor turned to the congregation. All in favor of suspending Deacon Maurice Carter from office pending audit and referring matters to authorities, say aye. The ayes rolled like thunder over tin. The nays barely whispered. Motion carries, Pastor said. Morris's face fell into a shape I'd never catalogued. A man learning he cannot narrate over evidence. He looked at me, last card in his eyes. You can't live without me, he said, almost tender. You don't know how. At my age, I said, I learned. Daniels nodded to Hughes. Mr. Carter, you will come with us to 118 Walnut to open the premises. Bring any keys you have. He glanced at my empty hand, remembered the evidence bag, and flinched. Then we'll use a warrant and a locksmith, Hughes said. People parted. The projector cooled with a small click. Children peered from the nursery doorway, wide-eyed, as if the shepherds had stumbled into a courtroom. I stepped down, the blue bag light now that it had given birth to its burden. Laverne linked her arm in mine. You okay? She asked. I'm hungry, I said, and we both almost laughed. Pastor reached for the mic, breath steady. Friends, go in peace. We will do the right thing tonight. So why did my phone buzz as we crossed the lot with officers toward Walnut, showing a new withdrawal attempt from our account, $7,500 at 8:22 p.m., and a location ping at a downtown ATM with Morris's name on it? My phone lit my palm. Red Mountain CU alert. Withdrawal attempt $7,500, 8:22 p.m. ATM, 3rd and Cedar, downtown. The screen showed Morris Carter as the cardholder. We were 10 steps from the church door. I turned the phone so Officer Daniels could see. We're here, I said. Who's at the ATM? Daniels spoke into his shoulder mic, crisp as winter. Unit 12, check 3rd and Cedar. Possible suspect using duplicate card to drain joint account. Name Maurice Carter. He cut his eyes at Goodson, who gripped his briefcase like a flotation device. Mr. Goodson, anyone else carrying Mr. Carter's card? Goodson's throat bobbed. His nephew sometimes. Maurice barked. No. Too fast. Too sharp. Which is it? Daniels asked. Before the lie could choose a jacket, we rolled toward 118 Walnut in a convoy. Hughes and Daniels up front, Pastor's sedan behind, Ronnie guiding in his pickup, and me in Laverne's Buick, the blue bag at my feet like a tired warrior. 8:33 p.m. We pulled up to the blue house I'd only seen in footage. The porch light hummed. Hughes knocked, announced, waited. No answer. She waved the locksmith forward. The cylinder gave with a neat cough. Inside, new paint, thrift store couch, 2 clean bedrooms, a framed print that said, "Bless this house," in a font that didn't know what it was blessing. Cash, Ronnie murmured, pointing under the sink. A metal box waited where bleach should have lived. Hughes popped it. A nest of envelopes labeled Petty Cash, Angel, Repairs, Deke. 24. She counted under her breath. $4,160. Ledger, I said, opening a kitchen drawer. A black and white composition book. Columns in Maurice's tidy hand. Round down notations like a rash. Goodson Trust scribbled twice in margins. T. Brooks initials by lock and paint. Daniels's radio crackled. Unit 12, ATM suspect fled. Partner in gray hoodie detained. Had Red Mountain debit ending 4312. Says M told him to clear the account. M for what? Laverne whispered. Mess? Goodson went pale. He should have been spackled to the wall. I can explain, he offered to the air. Hold that, Daniel said. We moved room to room, law and paper marking territory. In the back bedroom, Deshawn's backpack on the chair, textbooks stacked too neatly for a lie, a shoebox of rent receipts like Talia's, corners still warm from hope. In the closet, a file tote. Inside, a draft lease. Tenant Brooks, landlord Goodson Trust. Start date January 3rd, 2025. Security deposit, $2,000, cash. Stapled, a sticky note in Maurice's hand. Keep off books until audit blows over. Hughes photographed, tagged, bagged. Daniels looked at me and nodded once the way men nod at bridges that don't fall. Outside on the porch, my phone buzzed again. Unit 12, detained suspect ID, D. Green. Statement, Deacon said hit the ATM while they're distracted. Daniels relayed, jaw flexing. Maurice stared at the street like it owed him a horizon. This is out of context, he said hoarsely. At my age, I answered, context is a calendar and a balance sheet. Hughes turned from the door. Mr. Carter, based on forged signatures, attempted cash out, misappropriation of church funds, and evidence on site. You are under arrest for forgery, attempted theft by deception, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right. He took one step back, like the porch might bargain for him. It didn't. The click of cuffs sounded like a stapler when the last page finally lines up. Talia stood on the walk, arms crossed around herself, eyes on the ground. We didn't know, she whispered. He said after New Year's. I nodded once. Compassion doesn't cancel math. You and the boy will speak to victim services, not him. Daniel's radio cracked again. Bank fraud froze ending 4312. Flagged $85,000 cash deposit for review. Hold on all activity pending case. JARM 244897. Wind slid under my coat. I let it. Cold sometimes tells you the truth you can't get from warm rooms. Pastor exhaled the way a man does when a sermon he never planned to preach ends. Sister Evelyn, he said, voice smaller now that the crowd was gone. What do you need from us tonight? Keys to your copier, I said, and a promising auditor, and a promise that Angel Basket will never be rounded again. Done, he said, like he was tired of the wrong kind of math. Hughes guided Morris to the cruiser. He turned once, tried for my eyes, looking for the wife who waited. She'd clocked out at 6:12 p.m. So why, as the squad car pulled away and the house at Walnut sat breathing like a crime finally named, did a motion light blink on across the street, revealing a door camera aimed straight at the porch I'd just walked across, its red LED blinking like a witness I hadn't even questioned yet? The buried camera across from Walnut blinked like a patient eye, and I lifted my phone the way I lift prayer when paper runs out. Ronnie, I said, you know the neighbors? Mrs. Lee, he nodded. Keeps a tidy hedge and tidier records. She's out front at 6 a.m. with seed for birds like clockwork. We didn't wait for birds. Daniels knocked now, flashed badge. The door cracked. An eye, sharper than any usher's, took us in. You catching him? She asked. We're catching paper, I said. May we see your door cam? She stepped aside like the hallway had been waiting for this night since 2010. Her living room was a museum of birthdays, grandkids on mantels, calendars annotated with pen. The doorbell feed opened on her TV with a remote she handled like a pistol. I swap cards every month, she said. My son sets it. He says scammers like holidays. We watched December's fast as flips. Maurice's Buick nosing the curb. Baskets heavier than any casserole. Envelopes passed. Bills folded and tucked where a church never signed. Timestamps lined up with Ronnie's logs, like twins, the kind no parent admits they mix up. Mrs. Lee slid a drawer open, pulled a stack of microSD cards out of a labeled tin. Xmas 2019, Xmas 2020, Xmas 2021, Xmas 2022, Xmas 2023. She patted the top one, 2024. At my age, I appreciate a woman who files her life, I said. She smiled a little. We cloned the cards. Hughes tagged them, numbers neat, chain of custody tight enough to sing. Daniels thanked her. I squeezed her hand. You kept a lot of dinners honest, I told her. She nodded, like the birdseed could wait. Back at the church by 9:26 p.m., the boardroom turned into a war kitchen. Copier spitting pages, Sister Pearl sorting piles, Kiki renaming files with dates like a tiny archivist. Pastor made coffee and decisions. We will hire Satterwhite and Ward, independent auditors, he said, and we will read receipts aloud at the next business meeting, every penny. I looked at him long enough to make sure fear wasn't sneaking back in. Every penny, he repeated. My phone chimed. Email sent. Angel basket, walnut, documents, 7:55 p.m. The commissioner replied at 9:31. We will support a full audit and review of any grants tied to First Calvary. Paper had found more paper. That's how rivers form. Then, Attorney Ward answered the voicemail I'd left in the car. Mrs. Carter. Her voice came through calm and granite. I handle marital property and restitution. You have strong standing for an injunction to prevent transfer of assets and to recover misappropriated marital funds. Be at my office, Deck 26, 10 a.m. Bring everything. I'll bring a notary who doesn't flinch. Done, I said, and let the future pour a cup. At 10:02 p.m., the bank called. We flagged the account, attempted $7,500 blocked. We see patterns, structuring around December's, moving to freeze linked sub-accounts pending investigation. I closed my eyes, not to cry, to count. I walked the fellowship hall once more, alone. The projector sat cool. The stage still had a shepherd's crook leaning against the side like a prop who'd heard too much. I touched the mic just once. At my age, I don't like microphones, I told it. But I'll use one if it keeps a girl from eating lies for supper. Laverne found me, pressed a Tupperware into my hands. Turkey, dressing, pecan pie. You forgot to eat, she said. I hadn't forgotten. I had moved dinner to after consequences. When I got home, it was 10:47 p.m. The house smelled like the ghost of gravy. I set my plate on the table, then reached for the Christmas lights. I left them dark. Let the porch be a ledger for tonight. What is lit, what is not. I took off my ring, not ceremony, inventory. I placed it in a black velvet box I used to keep my mother's church pins. The velvet drank it. I wrote on an index card, ring, 10:53 p.m., Deck 24, 2024, in custody of E.M. Carter. I slid the card into the box and the box onto the highest shelf. You are not an instrument of pity, I told myself out loud in my kitchen. You are an accountant of harm. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost let it go when a thought landed. The pawn ticket. I answered. Mrs. Carter, this is Birmingham Golden Loan. You asked years back about a 14K estate bracelet. Ticket NUR A312. An item by that ticket was redeemed last week in cash. Signature on file, M. Carter. Mama's wrist flashed in my mind. The dent where the gold had been when I brushed lotion in and told her we'd buy it back. Do you have a copy of the signature? I asked. Can you email it tonight? We can, he said. Merry Christmas. Make it true, I said. So why, when the email came and Maurice's signature sprawled my screen, did I also find a second signature on the back, Calvin Goodson, and a note? Split? Christmas morning, 7:12 a.m. The house held its breath the way houses do after a long night of truth. I brewed coffee like a ritual and set 2 cups down, one for me, one for Mama, an old habit. We didn't get the bracelet, I told her, but we got the ledger. Notifications stacked like hymnals. Case, ERM 244897, progressed to investigation. BPD confirmed Calvin Goodson booked on charges, including aiding and abetting fraud and attempted backdating. D. Green released on citation and statement. First Calvary posted a notice. Emergency audit, benevolence pause, transparency meeting, John 3, 6 p.m. The church phone tree, for once, carried truth instead of rumors. At 9:40 a.m., Talia texted from a temporary number. "We're at my sister's. He told me I'd be safe if I lied. I won't. Deshaun says thank you." I typed back. "Tell him to bring his homework and his honesty to January. Both will take him far." I opened the velvet box again, not to wear the ring, but to photograph it for Attorney Ward. Assets logged, not clung to. I added copies of my post office time cards for DEC 2011, the hospice bill, the pawn email with Goodson's scrawl on the back. I printed the door cam still with 12/24, 2024, 23:59, peeking over Maurice's shoulder like the angel he didn't want. At 10 hours a.m. on Dece 26, I would walk into Ward's office with a tote that weighed less than marriage and more than a lie. Injunction, restitution, separation, maybe divorce if my spine asked for it. "I'm not afraid of forms," I rehearsed to my mirror. "I am afraid of forgetting. I won't." By noon, Laverne knocked with foil pans and new gossip. "They're saying the Deacon Board is starting a benevolence register, names, dates, amounts, public on the bulletin board." She raised a brow. "You did that with a 3-minute sermon and a USB." "I did it with 15 Christmases," I said. We ate at my table. I reheated turkey at 350 degrees until the skin crackled like an apology finally delivered. I added salt, not tears. "At my age, I season to taste," I told her. We laughed until the house exhaled. In the afternoon, I took a walk to Cahaba Road, past the Piggly Wiggly, past the storage place where 3B would be a number with a lock and a tag and a chain of custody for a long time. I paused at the angel basket notice taped to the church door. Someone had written audit in big letters across it. Not mean, just accurate. I pressed my palm to the glass. Women have been pressing their palms to glass for as long as men have called meetings in rooms with long tables. Today, the glass felt thinner. At home, I boxed up the blue bag, key, slip, copies, and labeled the carton C12, C15, opened. On top, I laid a single sheet of paper, printed in 18-point, so I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. At my age, I don't shout. I document. I sat on the porch at 6 p.m. out of habit and then out of choice, without turning the light on, without pretending someone might pull in with peppermint breath and a lie shaped like an errand. The azaleas didn't hold candles. They held dew. A car passed slow, not stopping. Good. My granddaughter called at 6:17. "Grandma, did you see the video? You were brave." "I was accurate," I said. "Brave is for when there's a fire. This was math." "What now?" she asked. "Now I start a little fund," I said. "A real angel basket with receipts and a lock I keep. We'll bring 2 bags next year, with our names and our amounts, and we'll deliver them early, not after dark." She giggled. "Can I help count?" "You can announce the number," I said. Loud. I ended the call and wrote one last list for the night. DEC 26, 10:01 a.m. Ward, injunction, restitution, separation papers. DEC 28, 1 p.m. Bank, new account, new routing, new rules. John 3, 6 p.m. Church, transparency meeting, public ledger. Feb 14. Me. Buy Mama's bracelet at auction if it surfaces. If not, buy a notebook with gold edges and call it even. I signed it with my own name. Down the block, someone's wind chime tried a song it didn't quite know. I smiled. At my age, I don't need it in tune to know it's mine. But when I opened the mailbox and found a plain envelope with no return address, and inside a Polaroid of a red toolbox under the floorboards at Walnut, captioned in ink, "You missed one," why did my fingers steady instead of shake as I reached for a fresh page labeled C16 Aftermath? If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.